You're not the person I used to know. This was a sentence that a dear friend of mine told me in 2021. Few weeks after that, I had obtained my diagnosis. I was suffering from depression without even realizing that. At that time, I was heavily involved in the neurotechnological field, so I tried to use that bad situation to make something positive out of it. I have learned about the neuroscience behind several mental health conditions to try to make a change. It took some time, but last week I finally launched Nearing on the App Store. But what is Nearing exactly? So Nearing is an app for iOS and Apple Watch that allows you to gather all the biometrical and behavioral data that you need to understand your mental health. The data stays on the device, is not shared with anyone, and the app is free. You may wonder why I kept on developing it even though I was healed from depression. And the thing is that in my everyday experiences, I've realized that we have to start from our self-awareness in order to build fulfilling lives and relationships that last. And I strongly believe that technology can be our ally to achieve that. There is an entire movement called the Quantified self-movement that aims at using data to improve our own health. But with such a constant flow of information, how do we transform raw data into meaningful health insights? This is today's goal. I will show you how I've used the data gathered on Nearing to better learn about myself. But let's stop talking and let's start exploring. And we will start with the first step, data exploration and data cleaning. So Nearing gathers a lot of data, both from user inputs, but also from the data that is acquired by the Apple Watch. But as the app gives you the possibility to export that data, this is what I did. I essentially exported it and imported it into a Python notebook. And already at looking at the beginning, there were several issues due to mainly lack of user input, my input, and also, unfortunately, due to some bugs of the app. Therefore, what I did essentially was to fix the mislabeled data and also identify a time window in which there was the majority of the data. That in my case was from July until September included. With that, after that data cleaning, now I felt more confident to define what are the features that I want to extract from the data. But in order to do so, it is important to start with asking the right question. So there are several approaches. A person may start with already a clear question in mind, but what I did was essentially looking at the data that I had available and see what I wanted to learn more about. So for instance, in my case, in August, there was an interesting spike in the depression score that then decreased in September. So considering also my previous health history, the research question was kind of straightforward. What data best correlates with my depressive symptoms? In this way, I could use these learnings to try to anticipate that in the future. So starting with the research question defined, it is easier to define what are the features that you want to extract from it. So in my case, there was the depression score, the average stress level data gathered from the Apple Watch, the principal component analysis of the activities and emotions, and also I wanted to do some analysis on the semantic components of the mental health notes that I wrote. So from the PCA analysis, what was interesting is that inadvertently, the components extracted from the emotions data give out the characteristics that usually are used to describe the emotions, that are the valence, so if it is positive or negative, and the arousal, so how much enticing or arousing that emotion is. Then regarding the semantic analysis, what I did essentially was clustering the mental health notes into 4 main clusters and try to plot them on the temporal axis. So with that set of features, I felt now confident to jump to the next phase. So starting to identify some correlation between my depression score and all this data. For sake of simplicity, I've tried to split the process in 2. The first one focused on analyzing the correlation between the depression score and emotions, activities, and stress levels. And the second step about the correlation or associations between the depression score and the semantic clusters of the notes. Let's start from the first one. So at the beginning, when I saw this, I was a bit suspicious because there was a perfect correlation between the principal components of the activities and the depression scores. However, considering that it was only 3 months and maybe the data was not that enough, I thought about discarding the result at the moment, and I want to test it and check it again in the next months to see whether that correlation makes sense. Regarding the emotions, it was interesting because the things that came out are aligned also with the neuroscientific components of a subtype of depression. So essentially, the first aspect is that the higher the depression score, the higher the variability of the emotional valence. So how much it changed the positive and negative emotions in that range of time. And lastly, the other aspect is that there is a cumulative effect of the negative component of the emotion. So the more I felt sad or bad in the previous weeks, the higher the correlation with the depression score. And that makes sense also neuroscientifically. Lastly, I was a bit suspicious about the inverse correlation between depression and the stress level, because under a neuroscientific point of view, I would have expected the opposite. However, then I realized that the test score of the depression level is based on you analyzing the previous 2 or 3 weeks, while the stress level is a measurement in the present moment. So I thought about analyzing a potential temporal offset. And luckily I did, because there was indeed a strong positive correlation between the cumulative stress in the previous 3 weeks and the depression level. Lastly, about the semantic cluster of nodes, the only thing that I extracted was that there was an association, or the first cluster of the nodes was associated with a higher depression score. And that cluster of nodes was centered around the semantics of overwhelm, stress, and panic. However, I would like to try it again in the next months to see whether from the mental health notes app is also possible to extract the causes, because this one is still overlapping with the emotions analysis. So from this, I've been able to obtain 5 main learnings that I could potentially use for future predictions. But in order to do so, I want to make some key takeaways for using this type of approach for this type of context. The first aspect is that mental health is very variable among several individuals, in particular depression, because there are several subtypes and the research is still ongoing. Therefore, differently from other sectors, what I would suggest is to do an individualized analysis of data. The second aspect is that considering that you restrict the data set available with only one person, you need to do a more like through iterative process to actually make sure that there are those patterns. And only after that, you could potentially use it for future predictions on your own. So this was just a shy first step towards this long journey. A journey that I think that requires the care, responsibility of each one of us. Because the thing is that technology, when used with the right intention, doesn't make us less human. It can make us more aware of who we truly are. Thank you.
Question? I have a question. Do you need, or do you think, to access more data to measure depression, or the data that you have is enough?
So the data that now Nearing uses is enough. Because essentially, under like a neuroscientific point of view, there are several correlations between like specific symptomatology and the brain networks that are affected by it, or that have like an impact on those symptoms. And these symptoms can be gathered from behavioral data. So for instance, in the Nearing case, the user can track the activities, but also import activities from the calendar, and then future, there will be also the possibility to import it from the apps that have been used during that day. But on the other side, regarding the biometrical more aspects, I think that, for instance, is usually underestimated is the change in the psychometric activity. So there are some subtypes of depressions in which the person moves more, and therefore Nearing uses the active calories that the person has consumed that time. So in terms of data, it's complete. Probably what would be needed is more like explanation to the user regarding how to better use that data.
Could you share us some information about the next step of your project?
Okay, so in terms of next steps now, I have the goal of having a lot more free users to actually share this approach in terms of life. On the other side, what I would like to do, and I'm developing, is a platform for the psychologists and psychiatrists that they can use to import the data that the patient exports from Nearing to have a more like data-oriented approach towards the therapeutic process. Well, now, if it is possible to have more like relationships with research institutions that work in this type of field, that would be great for the feedbacks.
Okay, go.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your framework. I think that was a really nice reminder for me to sort of the workflow through when do you stop collecting data and then start defining your questions and really pushing the app forward. My question is actually about if I know that I'm not necessarily in the best state of mental health, I'm not gonna do data input. How do you work with that loop or that sort of challenge?
Don't worry, go on.
No, yeah. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you make that easy for people who might be struggling with some type of, okay, we're not at 100%, we're not even at 90%.
It's clear.
Yeah.
So already in this first version, some changes in terms of user experience have been made. So for instance, there is an additional widget that you can put on the home screen so that you don't even have to go inside the app to insert the inputs. The second change that I was mentioning earlier is the import or the analysis based on the apps that you have used. So for instance, on Apple, you can, there is an API that you can use to see, okay, today you have used this and this app. And so the next version, there will be like an automatic import of that to decrease the cognitive load, because that is an issue that is a key concern for people with this type of situations.